Welcome to Voice of the Vatican. Our top stories. Celebrating a saint. We'll go to China, India, Peru, and the US to see how the Church's newest saint, Teresa of Calcutta, is being honored. Human trafficking. The Vatican sponsors a conference in Nigeria to discuss strategies to save the 600,000 to 800,000 people trafficked across international borders every year. Let the little ones come. The St. Rachel Center opens in Jerusalem, offering a safe environment for daycare for children of working asylum seekers. Marian Feast. A pilgrimage in Pakistan on the Feast of the Holy Name of Mary brings Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Sikhs to the largest Marian shrine in the country. Church Up Close. 30 international journalists gather in Rome to go behind the scenes at the Vatican and learn what makes the Holy See tick. Breaking Zika news. A newly published scientific study of 12,000 pregnant women infected with the Zika virus reveals that there is no link between Zika and microcephaly. Ancient pilgrimage path. We'll speak to a pilgrim who arrived in Rome in an unusual way. She walked, alone, traversing more than 1,000 miles from England over paths that many saints and pilgrims have trod before her. I'm Ashley Norona in Rome, Italy, and you're watching Voice of the Vatican, only on Shalom World TV. She was canonized on the 4th of September, but all over the world, celebrations continue in honor of Saint Teresa of Calcutta and the message of mercy she left with the world. In northeast India and the Diocese of Miao in the state of Arunachal Pradesh, the first hospital dedicated to Saint Teresa of Calcutta has been opened. The 25-bed hospital will prevent locals from having to travel over 100 kilometers to reach the neighboring state of Assam for medical care. In Bhubaneswar, India, 2,000 faithful, including lepers, refugees, the poor, and children cared for by the Missionary of Charity Sisters and Brothers, came together for a ceremony of thanksgiving, remembering how Mother Teresa was truly a light in the darkness. In nearby Orissa, which recently commemorated the martyrdom of local Christians, the first street named after the saint was dedicated. The chief minister of Orissa said it's done with hopes that India will become a home to serve the poor, needy, and oppressed. The Missionaries of Charity have 18 houses in Orissa, and recently the government asked them to take on the care of women with mental disabilities and homeless men. Currently, approximately 90 are accommodated in 4 Missionary of Charity houses in Orissa. In the Andes Mountains of Peru, Metropolitan Archbishop of Cusco, Richard Daniel Alarcón, celebrated a Mass of Thanksgiving, and the Sisters of the Hogar Mother Teresa of Calcutta house in that diocese were present, along with some of the people they care for, the sick, mentally disabled women, and elderly homeless men. The Archbishop exhorted all to imitate the love and mercy of Mother Teresa, as she embodies the language of the gospel. And through her witness, God asks each of us to do the same, with simple and pure attitudes of love. After Mass, a joyful procession was held in her honor. Meanwhile, in the Hebei province of China, the first parish church in China dedicated to Saint Teresa of Calcutta has been consecrated. Bishop Joseph Luliangui of the Diocese of Kangzhou presided, along with 15 concelebrating priests. The Catholic community there is made up of about 300 people, although just a few years ago, there was only one Catholic family in the area who began sharing Christ with others through the scriptures. And in Atchison, Kansas, USA, a statue of Mother Teresa was unveiled and blessed in front of the Mother Teresa Nursing and Health Education Center. And the Amelia Earhart Memorial Bridge in Atchison was bathed in blue light during the days surrounding her canonization. The canonization is over, but the celebrations continue for the woman who Pope Francis called an emblematic figure of womanhood and a tireless worker of mercy, whose heart belonged only to Christ. The UN Office on Drugs and Crime has reported that human trafficking is the fastest growing international crime and one of the largest sources of income for organized crime. UNICEF estimates that 1.2 million children are trafficked every year. To fight the scourge, a 3-day international conference was held in Abuja, Nigeria, entitled Human Trafficking Within and from Africa. Caritas International and the Vatican's Pontifical Council for the Pastoral Care of Migrants and Itinerant People brought representatives from faith-based organizations international, law enforcement, and NGOs to share best practices and identify common strategies for prevention. One of the reported findings was that Catholic women religious have been front and center at the forefront of the fight against human trafficking and have developed multiple concrete initiatives and organizations. Meanwhile, in Asia, a similar conference was held in Hanoi, Vietnam, hosted by the Ministry of Public Security. In Vietnam, cases of human trafficking between 2011 and 14 increased by 11.6% compared to the previous 4 years. The dramatic rise is being attributed to the use of social media to lure victims. There are approximately 20 to 30 million slaves in the world today, and it's thought that 1/3 come from Southeast Asia. Trafficking primarily involves exploitation, which comes in many forms, including forcing victims into prostitution, subjecting victims to slavery or involuntary servitude, and compelling victims to commit acts for the purpose of creating pornography. Pope Francis has called human trafficking a plague on humanity. These efforts serve as reminders of the Holy Father's exhortation that combating this evil is a moral imperative. A new center for children has been opened this month in Jerusalem, called the St. Rachel Center. The goal of the center is to aid the migrant population in Israel by offering safe and healthy daycare for children. Previously, as asylum seekers worked long hours, many were forced to leave their children in so-called baby warehouses, where children are kept in crowded, unhygienic environments, administered by untrained migrants. In the past year and a half, 7 children have died in these circumstances in South Tel Aviv. The new St. Rachel Center is on the property of the Capuchin Monastery in Jerusalem and is under the auspices of the St. James Vicariate for Hebrew-speaking Catholics. The location was completely renovated thanks to the assistance of donors, foremost being the Equestrian Order of the Knights of the Holy Sepulchre. Currently, 25 children are being cared for there, and on weekends, the center offers a meeting place for youth of the Catholic Vicariate. This effort is a reflection of the words of Pope Francis at the World Meeting of Families, who urged all of us to serve and care for each other as freely as God loves the human family. In celebration of Monday's solemnity of the Holy Name of Mary, a large presence of Muslim, Hindu, and Sikh leaders and believers joined Catholics to make pilgrimage to the National Shrine of Our Lady of Mariamabad in the Diocese of Lahore, Pakistan. Archbishop Sebastian Shaw welcomed pilgrims, while organizations and individual Christian and Muslim benefactors provided refreshments and medical services for the 400,000 pilgrims, many of whom arrived on foot or by bicycle, making a journey that can last several days. The sanctuary of Mariamabad, which means Mary's village, was built by Belgian Capuchins in 1898 and is the most popular Marian sanctuary in Pakistan. On site is also a peace center committed to interreligious dialogue and run by the Dominican order. We pray that the glorious Queen of Peace protect all of her children from discord and direct our hearts into the ways of peace and justice, taught and exemplified by her Son, Jesus Christ. After his election, Pope Francis expressed his gratitude to journalists, saying, quote, "I am particularly grateful to those who viewed and presented these events of the Church's history in a manner which was sensitive to the right context in which they need to be read, namely that of faith. To assist members of the media in doing just that, the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross hosted the 5th edition of the Church Up Close seminar in Rome, which welcomed 30 international journalists and communication specialists who cover religion. For 7 days, these journalists had the opportunity to meet key players at the Vatican and get an up-close look at how things run inside of the Holy See.
Well, really, there's no better place to be learning about the Vatican and the inner workings of the Church and the history than where it all started. And learnt so much this week about all sorts of things to do with the Catholic Church around the world, because coming from Australia, a long way away, at least 24 hours, you can sometimes not realise how much of the Church is overseas. It's been really interesting to hear how the Curia works, what the processes are, the discrepancies between legal systems overseas and how the Vatican state works. So all that context, it helps people understand why there are delays, why there are misunderstandings. I think those things are really important to be able to communicate to people back home.
It's not enough you being a Catholic and a journalist and thinking you know everything about the church. No, it goes beyond that. If you want to do something or report on the church, for example, you should rather get closer to the church, know a lot of things about the church, know where the informations are coming from, and ask yourself whether it is newsworthy, whether it is true, and if it is true, who do you contact? So, for example, if I'm in Ghana and I'm reporting on Rome, I know where to get my sources from, even if I'm not here, and it has really helped me a lot.
I understand these concepts in theory, and at our Sunday Visitor, we really do try to get an understanding of how the church works. But to see it, to come to Rome, this is my first trip, was really important. Things like our trip to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. You know, we hear about these commissions and councils, but to go there and see the actual building and talk to the actual people who work there, see the inner workings, was really beneficial for me to kind of help our readers also get a better understanding.
I can see the first thing, all issues what is coming out from Vatican actually. I can meet directly people in Vatican who are involved, because direct contact is always very important.
One of the things is when you cover the church, you realize the more you learn, there's so much more you don't know. One of the good things about this is that I've been with colleagues from around the world. So even in the questions they ask from the various parts of the world they represent, you learn something. So understanding the church in Asia, understanding the church in the Middle East, understanding the church in the Caucasus, you know, it's been really eye-opening, not just from the presenters, but from my fellow students here.
By coming for this conference, we have learned so much about the Vatican City, the workings in the Vatican City, the prepared documents. We have also learned from professionals so that we go home and do our jobs better than we've always done before.
With fears of Zika on the rise, a new study published by the New England Journal of Medicine has completely changed what many assumed was true about Zika. In Colombia, a study was conducted of nearly 12,000 pregnant women infected with the Zika virus. In those births, researchers found 0 microcephaly cases. In light of this evidence, the New England Complex Systems Institute says the alleged cause of the extraordinarily high number of cases of microcephaly in Brazil must be reconsidered immediately. One hypothesis for the high number of microcephaly cases is the pesticide pyriproxyfen, which is added to drinking water in some parts of Brazil to kill the larvae of mosquitoes that transmit Zika. Pyriproxyfen is an analog for insect juvenile hormone, which is cross-reactive with retinoic acid, which is known to cause microcephaly. A physicians group in Brazil and Argentina, the Swedish Toxicology Sciences Research Center, and NECSI have called for further studies of the potential link between the pesticide pyriproxyfen and microcephaly. According to Catholic social teaching, it is a duty of scientists and researchers to ensure that thorough testing and analysis are done to promote the health and well-being of the human person. Coming up next, we'll go up close with the head of the Church and Sports section at the Vatican to hear about the role of sports in the mission of the Church. And we'll celebrate faith with the first beatification in Kazakhstan and look at the life of a priest who was twice imprisoned for his faith and labored in the Gulag without ever losing sight of Christ. And we'll take you to the small town of Manipello, Italy, where an ancient cloth bears the image of the face of Christ.
Did you like the program you just watched? Help Shalom World bring more programs like this to a global audience. Your support helps us share the peace of Christ with the world. Visit shalomworld.org/donate.
And first, more headline news. Some walk for health, some out of necessity, but some to get closer to God. The Via Francigena is an ancient pilgrimage walking path that covers more than 1,200 miles, from Canterbury, England to Rome, Italy. Its history dates to at least the 9th century, as the first recorded mention is on a parchment from 876. Even in today's age of super-fast transport, the long path is still being walked today. Voice of the Vatican spoke to Taryn Watkins about her experience after walking the path for 83 days.
The greatest desire for this pilgrimage was to live a life of radical dependence on the Lord and to spend some time in prayer and to let the Lord do what he wanted. There's a real vulnerability in letting yourself be led in this way, not knowing really what it's going to be like, and a radical trust in the Lord to not only just physical things, but just being able to make it to Rome.
In addition to countless nameless priests, bishops, religious, and pilgrims, parts of the ancient path have been walked by St. Ignatius of Loyola, St. Catherine of Siena, St. Francis of Assisi, and St. Augustine of Canterbury. At the end of the 10th century, Sigeric the Serious, Archbishop of Canterbury, walked the Via Francigena to travel to and from Rome in order to receive his pallium from the Pope.
This path that had been walked by so many saints, so many people before me, the closer I got to Rome, the stronger that sense became. You start to see these little churches. In La Storta, there's a chapel where St. Ignatius, as he was walking to Rome, had this vision of the Lord, and these same paths that have been traveled for hundreds and thousands of years by normal, everyday pilgrims and saints, great saints. And there's a real communion in time and space with these saints who love the same Lord.
Taryn said she also learned a lot from others she met along the way, particularly one of her Swiss hosts.
This man really impressed me because, yes, I've been walking this kind of physically challenging pilgrimage, but this man who could not walk this pilgrimage had such a profound sense of pilgrimage. This man lived out pilgrimage every single day. He really had a great love for the Lord and a great sense that heaven is the goal. Heaven is the goal, and this life is God's gift, but we're on the way.
Pope Benedict called each of us to walk as pilgrims, growing in knowledge and in imitation of Christ, who walks with us today.
I am so thankful to the Lord for giving me this great and rare opportunity. Not many people I know have the ability, the time, the call from the Lord. I really felt like the Lord was calling me to do this. And so I just want to say thank you to the Lord for giving me this great grace. It's been a really important journey that I think I'll continue to digest as the time goes on.
On September 18th, the Paralympic Games in Brazil will come to an end. This multi-sport event brought together 4,342 international athletes, representing 139 countries. Throughout, the Vatican has had a presence in Rio during the Paralympic Games at a place called Casa Italia, which means the Italian house. Voice of the Vatican went up close with Dr. Santiago Pérez de Camino Gaisse, the head of the Church and Sports section at the Vatican, to find out more.
Like an embassy for Italian people, but also a place to promote Italian culture, food, many different things. With the support of the Diocese of Rio de Janeiro and the sponsorship of the Holy See, they organized it in a parish, in the Immaculate Conception Parish in Rio, which is not far from the Olympic Village. And this way they are saving a lot of money, and they are returning the money, creating places for people with special abilities in Rio that they can play sports. They are creating fields and different structures for them in Rio de Janeiro. So it's as Pope Francis says, it's another way to see sports and to dignify the people.
In 2004, Pope John Paul II instituted the Church and Sports section to be a point of reference in the Church for national and international sports organizations. It's meant to emphasize the importance of the pastoral ministry of sports environments and to encourage cooperation amongst Catholic sports associations, to foster a sports culture as a means of bringing about the holistic growth of the person at the service of peace, to promote the study of specific issues relating to sport, particularly from an ethical point of view, and to organize and support initiatives that encourage Christian witness by athletes.
Sports, like any other thing that the human being does, is interesting for the Church, because sports, it's a unique tool to evangelize. There's no difference of religion, ideology, politics, money, so everybody can play sports. Pope Francis has repeatedly said that when sports are understood correctly, sport is always a source of growth for the human being.
Since 1906, over 600 speeches have been given by popes on the topic of sport, many of whom were athletes and sports fans themselves. Pope John Paul II was an avid skier, outdoorsman, and soccer player. Pope Pius XII, the boxer, Pius XI, an alpinist. Pope Francis, a soccer fan, and Pius X even welcomed the New York Giants and Chicago White Sox for a visit to the Vatican in 1914.
We have very close, very good Christian Catholic testimonies of people that were very huge fans of sports. For example, Guido Schaffer, who was his cause of canonization is now open. He was a seminarian in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, and he drowned in 2009. He was called the angel of the surfers, and we hope he could be the patron of athletes and sportsmen and women, because he has a very incredible testimony of how can an athlete can be also a person of faith.
You can watch the full interview on Church and Sport at www.shalomworldtv.org/VOV. He's called the Man of Hope and the Apostle of Kazakhstan. This week, Father Vladislav Bukowinski was beatified in Kazakhstan by Cardinal Angelo Amato, Papal Legate and Prefect of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. It was the first beatification ever in Kazakhstan. Father Bukowinski was a Polish Roman Catholic priest who was teaching in a Polish seminary before World War II began. He was renowned for his strength of character, unwavering virtue, and constantly making efforts to respond to conflict with the love of Jesus Christ. When the Soviets invaded in 1946, he was sentenced to a decade of imprisonment in the Gulag, where, among other things, he dug ditches, worked in the copper mines, and cleared trees. Yet, during his grueling imprisonment, he managed to secretly hear confessions, to celebrate masses, preach retreats, and visit the sick. It was only through prayer that he managed to overcome hunger, fear, and violence. Upon his release in 1954, he could have returned to Poland, but instead chose to take Soviet citizenship to remain close to the people there. He was sent to the Diocese of Karaganda in Kazakhstan, making him the first Catholic priest to arrive in the nation. He secretly celebrated masses in private homes, pulling curtains over windows in order to avoid detection. He was arrested again and sentenced to 3 years in a labor camp, there making a rosary out of small pieces of bread, held together with wire. He returned to Karaganda in 1962, where he continued his pastoral duties until he died in 1974 with a rosary in his hands. Cardinal Amato said Father Bukowinsky always knew the arrests and deportations were signs of providence, knowing God would want a priest in the midst of these places of horrible suffering. Father Bukowinsky spoke often of his hope for the rebirth of the faith in Russia, as it is faith that breaks down walls. Cardinal Amato said the camp itself became Father Bukowinsky's pulpit, from which he taught others to love God and of the importance of reconciliation with our neighbors. 166 miles east of Rome, in the mountains of Abruzzo, is a church which houses a great treasure of the faith. It's known as the Holy Face Cloth of Christ, believed to be the actual veil from the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem that once covered the face of Christ, along with the shroud while inside of the tomb. Voice of the Vatican spoke to Father Carmine Cucinelli, the rector of the Sanctuary of the Holy Face of Manopello, about the history and science behind this sacred cloth.
Researchers have compared and contrasted the Holy Shroud of Turin with the Holy Face of Manopello. If you overlay one with another, you can see how they coincide perfectly. Not only the mouth, nose, and eyes, but also other elements like the wounds to the eyes, nose, and mouth, and the tear in the beard. 80% of the points match, so researchers say the two faces are the same person. This cloth shows Easter Sunday, Jesus with his eyes open. A bright flash of light with a spontaneous release of focused energy occurs in the tomb that would have caused and created the image on this veil, making it photosensitive to light, just as when we put film into a camera. So it has imprinted on it the resurrected face of Christ with his eyes open. So, here we have Pinna nobilis, a mollusk, which is a shellfish that lives at 5 to 6 meters in the depths of the Mediterranean Sea. In order to resist the movement of the sea, it releases a filament which takes root under the sand. The filament can be up to 40 centimeters in length. It's very strong, but also waterproof. So this cloth is made of that filament, and although it can be stained by seaweed, it cannot be painted, since paint doesn't attach to this waterproof filament. Also, between the pieces of filament, we can see that there is no paint. A laser exam called Raman shows that there are no colors added to this canvas. We too have to stamp Jesus' face into our hearts, and this holy face has been used as a model for artists creating art from the 3rd century until the 16th century. In the 16th century, Rome was sacked, and so many churches desecrated and sacred objects stolen. It was lost for a period and recently rediscovered.
When Pope Benedict visited the shrine in 2006, he spoke to the hearts of the faithful, saying, "We are all seeking the face of the Lord. And this is also the meaning of my visit. Let us seek together to know the face of the Lord ever better. And in the face of the Lord, let us find this impetus of love and peace, which also reveals to us the path of our life." All week long, you can keep up with the latest happenings in Rome on our Twitter feed, which is @Voice of Vatican. Be sure to like our Facebook page, Voice of the Vatican. And keep checking our social media feeds for breaking news and information about upcoming guests and features. And we want to hear your voice too. Email your questions and stories to us at vov@shalomworld.org. This is Ashley Nerona in Rome, Italy, and on behalf of the entire staff and crew of Voice of the Vatican, I wish you a blessed week. May God bless you and your family. Saying ciao for now from the Eternal City. I'll see you next week right here on Voice of the Vatican, only on Shalom World TV, bringing Rome to your home.